Hey guys, this is the juicy fruit, and I don't usually start by showing the underwater footage, but I just have to with this fly because it is so freaking good. Take a look at how that Marabou, the lateral line, and the hot spot on the side really just pop and sell this as a living minnow. The fish go absolutely crazy for it, and it's become one of my go-to and most productive flies on the water. So let's take a look at how we construct the juicy fruit. Let's start with the hooks. So I've got a 1530 Daiichi on the back, a Gamakatsu wide gap up front, a 5/32 tungsten bead, and then across both the front and the back, I use Marabou in tan and white. For the lateral line, I'm using a Flashabou Mirage in pearl. And then across the top, I have a shimmer fringe in black pearl. On the inside, I have ice dub both in UV pearl and in tan. And then on the front, I've got a hot spot, basically two of them. Both are laser dub, one with red and the other is lavender. So without further ado, let's get tying. All right, so we're going to start with material prep. We're going to use UV ice dub in pearl and also in tan. And basically we're going to create 5 piles and we're going to go from least to most. All right, so for the hook, we're going to use a Daiichi 1530 number 6. And for thread, I'm using a Vivus 100 gel spun. I'm just going to go back to the hook point. Okay, for our lateral line and for our tail flash, I'm going to be using a Flashabou. This stuff is awesome. It's Mirage and it's in opal. You got to be careful with this stuff because it flashes so much. You can actually create too much of a flash in a fly. So I just took about a 3-inch piece, folded it in half, and I'm going to cut and leave about an inch off the back. Okay, next I'm going to be using Marabou and I'm going to be using the color tan. So I'm going to put 2 different pieces on each side, and I'm just going to grab, in this case, it looks like about an inch worth of materials. And as you can see, I have the tips, they're lined up, and I'm actually going to pull a little bit out of that because I want there to be translucency here. So I've got about a half an inch or so. And I'm going to have the length of the hook itself. So just going to pinch it into place and then I'm going to wrap up. And I don't care if the Marabou goes over, it doesn't really matter to me. I am going to trim it and wrap up to get that material locked into position. Come back, rotate things over, and I'm going to attempt to put the exact same amount of material on the opposite side. So I've got it pinched, tips are straight, pull it back, good. Lining it up, looks good. Gonna wrap 1, 2, 3. Looks good. I'm gonna trim it and then I'll wrap up and get everything locked into position. Okay, it's time for ice dub. So I'm gonna start with tan. I'm gonna grab the least amount of tan that I have. And now I'm just going to straighten the tips out. So I'm just gonna pull and lay them down so the tips are mostly in alignment. And I'm going to basically create a V to put it in, lock it into position. So there we go. 1, 2, 3, it's locked in. And I'm going to do the exact same with the UV ice dub. I'm going to align the tips first and pinch it, come right underneath. And this is all going to help us create the taper and obviously the color for underneath. I'm going to go to the middle, grab my second least amount of the ice stub and tan, align the tips, pinch it into position, come up over it, 3. Same with my ice stub. And this is where material prep really pays off because, one, you know you're getting the right amounts of material, and then 2, it just takes seconds to get it right. Line in the tips. And we're going to do a little bit of trimming after this just to get the taper right. In the tips. Pinch up on top. There we go. And now I'm going to create the taper that I want. So I'm going to come in at a 45-degree angle. Create a taper there. I'm going to do the exact same on the bottom. Create the taper, do a quick measure, just off a little. And now, just because I'm a little crazy with this stuff, I'm going to grab my anvil taperizing scissors and I'm just going to cut half and then go to 3/4 and do the same thing on the bottom. Cut half and then go 3/4. All right, pull those loose materials out of there. And that's what's going to give us our structure underneath, and it's also going to give us our little bit of flash. I'm just going to hit that a little bit more. And you can see we've got equidistant and equal materials both on the top and the bottom. Okay, we're going to go back to our Marabou, and I'm going to grab my tan. And I'm going to grab about an inch worth of materials. Of course, it depends on each different Marabou plume that you get, but I want my tips fairly aligned. I want them to go back halfway on the length. And I'm just going to do a quick realignment here to make sure they're good. And I'm going to do 3 loose wraps and cinch. That looks good. I'm going to trim, but I'm going to add just a little bit more on this side. And I want a very light veil. I do not want it heavy. Again, I want translucency. I want that ice dub to blend through. So as you look at it now, you can see through, you can see the ice dub. Our tips go about halfway back. That looks nice. Okay, next I'm gonna do the belly, which is gonna be Marabou in white. I'm gonna get rid of some of these, what I would consider to be chunky feathers. And now I've got some nice wispy materials. That'll be the belly. So I'm gonna align the tips, strip it off. And come right in on the bottom. Again, for a distance, I want the tips about half out the tail. So I've got it where I want. Just gonna transfer, and I'm gonna do 3 loose wraps. Get everything up on top, cinch. I'm gonna come in front, just hit it 2 times with my thread. And then just trim it nice and close. All right. Now, I've got a little material in there. If there's material that I want to get out of the way, I've got my cauterizer. It's a slick little tool. It helps you get in close, clear eyes if you have to. Okay, now it's time for the lateral line. I'm going to use that Flashabou Mirage Opal again, and I've got like a 3-inch piece here that I cut off of it. I'm just going to fold it in half, pull it back, lay it right along the side, and then just do 3 loose wraps. Looks good. And now I'm going to do the exact same on the opposite side. So I've got my 3/4-inch piece, bend it right over, lay it right down the side. Okay, that looks good. Now, for the last piece, I'm going to use what's called Ice Dub Shimmer Fringe. This stuff is a really cool substitute for peacock. And as you can see, it comes in these pretty amazing little sheets, and it's incredibly convenient because you can just cut off a small amount. And when I say small, you can see exactly the size. And I'm gonna lay it right on top. And if you don't have this stuff, listen, you can use peacock. I just find that it's easy to lay this material down and get it to set properly right over top. So I got 3 loose wraps in there. You can see how nice it sits right over the top. I'm just going to come in now, clip it off. Get those scissors right down to the bottom. And you can either super glue, you can do your whip finish. In this case, I'm just going to grab a little Solera's bone dry because it's close and convenient. Come in with the razor. All right, let's trim the lateral line. And I just want it to go about the length of the body. And then as far as the shimmer fringe, I just want that to go the length of the body as well. And I'm just going to use my anvil taperizing to trim it so it's not just a straight line. Okay, next we're going to do the connection. The connection is going to be Orvis. This is mono in 25 pounds. And I've cut off about a 4-inch piece of mono here. And on it, I've put some A-dot glass beads in silver. I put 2 in there. And I'm just going to thread, double it over, pull just a little bit, and now we're ready for the front part of the fly. All right, for the front hook, we're using a Gamakatsu. This is a Finesse wide gap. It's a size number 4. And for a bead on here, I've got a 5/32 silver bead. And I'm still using my Vivis 100 gel spun. Just put a little base on there. And now I'm going to grab the mono bead and the back part of the fly. And I'm going to make sure that the 2 pieces of mono run horizontally along each other. It's not twisted. And I'm going to tie it in. I'm just going to do 3 loose wraps just to make sure everything is good. It's not twisted. It looks right. And now as far as a gap between the back hook and the front hook, I want 3/4 of an inch. Anything less than that, you're sacrificing your ability to hook the fish. So that looks about right. Cinch down. Double this back over. Lock and cut. I'm going to use my trusty Zap-A-Gap just to make everything, make sure this connection doesn't break down at all. All right, so ice dub. I've got my tan, so I'm just going to line the tips. And I'm going to pinch it, put it right on top. It looks good. I'm going to grab my ice stub and UV pearl, align the tips, come right up underneath. The cool thing when you fold it in half like that is you can set it anywhere you want. Now I'm going to go up 3/4. I've got my largest amount of tan ice stub here. Lock it into position, grab my UV pearl. Same thing, right down on the bottom. All right. And I'm just going to cinch and lock everything into position. So I'm going to do my trimming now. I'm going to come in at a 45, cut it down. I'm going to do the same thing here. Try to do the exact same distance. You can cheat if you want and measure up that way or measure this way. Looks good. Use my anvil taperizing scissors. Halfway, 3/4 of the way. Same thing down below. Don't get your thread. Halfway, 3/4 of the way. Good. Okay, and now we're going to put in our hotspot. So that looks good. I'm happy with how that's sitting. And the hotspot is just a little bit of laser dub in red, and I'm emphasizing little. So that's as much as you need. It is basically a wisp. And I'm going to go underneath, so I'm going to quick align the tips. Okay, tips are aligned. I'm going to double, come underneath, and I'm going to go right behind my tungsten bead. And now I'm going to clip incredibly tight, and you can see it's a very small amount of material that sits there on the bottom, and that's going to bleed through. You'll be able to see that just fine. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of lavender on here, laser dub, just for the cheek. So I've grabbed out a very thin amount again, and this time I'm going to cut it in half, and I'm going to use the 2 center amounts for the cheek, so I know that I'm consistent with the amount. I'm just going to lay it right along the side and do 3 wraps. Fold it back over itself and lock it into position. Do the exact same thing here. Grab that other piece of lavender, fold it in half. Three loose wraps. That was 2, 3. Make sure you got it in position. Nothing else is captured. Lock it. And then trim it. And now it's time for the lateral lines. So I'm going to go back to my Flashabou Mirage. Cut it in half. Fold it in half over the thread. Lay it right along that center. As far as length, I want it to go the length of your mono loop there. to the end of the mono loop. Do the same thing on this side. Fold it in half. Lay it right along the side. Length right to the end of that mono loop. Back to our Marabou. I'm grabbing my tan. Again, I want a thin envelope basically going over, so I'm going to line the tips. A little bit heavier than what I had last time. I've got about an inch at the base. Just going to pull it, and I'm going to lay it over top. And as far as length, I want it to go just to the beginning of the next fly. So that looks good. I've got the amount, I've got it in position. Transition to my other finger. Once, twice, 3 loose wraps. And I'm just going to cinch and trim. Now, it doesn't matter if you have a little material at the front there. It's okay, because what we're going to do is, one, we still have to put our shimmer fringe over top, and then two, we're going to end up putting a little collar around it of ice stub, which will cover up any little Marabou there. All right, so that's the tan. Next, I'm grabbing the white. I'm going to do the exact same thing, and I want to have about the exact same material, so I'm going to grab about an inch off of the bottom. There we go. Come right over. I want about the exact same length. Looks like I got it. Double check. Lock it in position with your other fingers. Come up. Do those 3 loose wraps, which is going to allow you to get everything situated. Good. Got it in position. Pull down and cinch. Now I'm going to come in and trim. Looks good. Just going to pull the materials back and go over it a couple times just to everything in. You can hear when I pull down on that GSP, I can physically just lock that stuff in and behind the bead. That's where the GSP really pays off. Okay, time for shimmer fringe. And I'm going to clip off a very small amount. This is another where a little goes a long, long way. And as far as length, you want the tips of the shimmer fringe just to align with the beginning of the back fly. And if it goes over a little, no big deal. Pinch it in place. 1, 2, 3 loose wraps. Make sure it's up on top, hasn't moved on you. Pull straight down, lock it in. And trim the excess. Looks great. Okay, last, we've got pearl. Ripple ice dub. This is mother of pearl. It doesn't matter. You could use the exact same laser dub that we used before. It just gives it a little different hue. And I'm just going to dub the material on. So I'm not putting a lot. You can see it's a very thin dub that's on there. And on the back side of this, I'm going to actually put a little bit of Zap-A-Gap because that's how I'm going to secure everything into place. And I'm just going to pinch a little and I'm going to apply Zap-A-Gap on that last inch or so. And you can see the little beads that beaded up on there. So wrap around, take a minute, look around your fly, make sure everything's in position the way that you want it. And now come in front, and now you're going to be able to lock everything right into position by pulling down. So you got your collar, everything's locked in place. And that is the juicy fruit.